Alright, so hopefully you can hear me. I finally got my mics back. So who knows? Who knows what the levels are. I just finished Baldur's Gate 3. I've been very sick, so I've actually been out of work for just over a week. Oh, excuse the cough. But during that time, I was able to finish Baldur's Gate 3. So I wanted to share my thoughts. I got some strong feelings about this game. You know, most of them are good. I am doing a spoiler warning. Let me just say the gameplay is not the fun part of this game. Exploring the world, interacting with the world, learning the story, I think is the main point. So if you're concerned about getting that spoiled, I certainly wouldn't watch this. Alright, so just to summarize my feelings on the overall Baldur's Gate 3 systems. I was going to do a thing on major bugs. I've taken that out and I didn't update this slideshow. You can see it's a low effort slideshow. Then I want to talk about Acts 1, 2, and 3 and my overall feelings. Alright, so the overall system, I've been waiting for this for a long time. I've played a lot of 5th edition. I have played campaign from level 1 to 20. They were pretty hard encounters. They were pretty diverse encounters. I've also played 3.5 from level 1 to epic, and I've also played many campaigns in between. I started playing in 3rd edition D&D, so I don't know anything about the systems prior to that. I didn't like 4th edition, so I didn't play it. I did give it a shot, but it sucked. So, of course, I used to play games like Neverwinter Nights, and so I've been waiting for a 5th edition RPG in that style, and this is it, and I'm not disappointed. This is pretty much exactly what I wanted. There are differences to this system. I don't care for most of the changes, but they don't really matter, frankly. You know, like total defense isn't an action, so you can't just make it so you have disadvantage to be hit, for example. You know, some of the bullshit that happens with grappling is gone. But anyway, that doesn't really matter. So, the next bullet point is, this is something I do not like about specifically the way they implemented things in the video game, which is pretty much every encounter is a deadly encounter. When I was backing, gosh, like Numenera or some shit, some other RPG, they were saying, hey, do you want to be able to toggle between real-time and turn-based? And my camp was for the toggle. You could do real-time or turn-based, because if you played like Dragon Age or, you know, the older like Neverwinter Nights, you got to where certain encounters were systematic. I know how to fight these guys. I can basically program in my moves and just run it real time, and we're done with it. I don't have to sit here waiting for my turn while the 30th goblin in a row goes. And the decision for that game, I think Tides of Numenera, was we're going to go turn-based, not because we can't figure out how to make it real time, but because we're going to make every encounter essentially a deadly encounter. We're going to make it so it's impossible for you to want to play real time because you can't succeed. And that's a mentality I don't like. You can cheese a CRPG no matter what. Okay, making it so every encounter assumes that I've had a full rest beforehand it can get tedious. It can be a pain in the ass because it's fun to just do minimally difficult encounters that require a little thought. Maybe you can use a clever trick here or there, but those don't really, from my playthrough, they don't really exist in Baldur's Gate 3. It's either laughably easy, it has a mechanic that if you figure out the mechanic, it's a joke encounter, or they're just freaking hard and you have to cheese them the way that you cheese in 5th edition. And that's my next point, is cheese it just like high level 5e. But it's a little easier to exploit the computer. I find even on Tactician, it's still pretty easy to exploit them. Essentially, you figure out, you've got a boss encounter, right? It's deadly. This boss is like 400 HP, or 666, for example, and can one-shot anybody. Not kill them, but drop them, okay? And they have a shit ton of ads. So what you do is you just kill all the ads, you burn up all of your resources killing those ads, and then when you get to the final boss, and I did this for every final boss pretty much, except for a few that I had to redo, and I just figured out, oh, there's some other way, there's a way to approach this that I can not cheese it, I can actually just go for it. And then some of it's just pure luck based, obviously. You just gotta be like, oh, well, I'll get into that in a minute. But, so what you do, kill all the ads, then you've just got this nasty, mean boss and whoever's remaining in your party. And essentially what I would do is I'd figure out who the boss is fixated on. I was playing a paladin. Paladins can be indestructible. So essentially my paladin would just use his action to pick somebody up, and the boss would use their action to put them back down, and then I hopefully had a third character that could do some chip damage to him, like 10 damage a turn. And it it made these encounters just tedious and boring. Enemy spam's a big problem. That's why it's vital to have a wizard or a sorcerer. In my experience with 5th edition, Fireball is kind of a lackluster spell, and Evocation wizards are kind of weak. Now, in Baldur's Gate 3, so one of the changes is everything is ridiculously short range in Baldur's Gate 3. Which means instead of hurling a fireball, across the field where nobody is just to initially get some damage on the enemy, you're hurling that fireball on your party. So it just means you have to play, if you got Gale in your party, he has to be Evocation. I tried Divination, which is normally the strongest, but when you can drop a fireball on your party, it's so powerful in this game. Or even lightning bolts and things like that. It's so powerful because the range is so short. I mean, like Disintegrate, it feels like a damn touch spell. It's not. It's ranged, but it's just insane how short the range is on some of these spells. They force you to get up in the action, and it makes wizards very vulnerable. Another big change is by the very nature of the map design, shoves are retarded. I hate shoves so much. So in typical D&D, there's almost no way to kill somebody by a shove. But the way the maps are set up, 90% of the time, a shove is just an instant kill. And that's kind of cool for you. You can always just shove people. You lose the loot from them. But what's not cool is there's a lot of spells that just automatically shove you. And sometimes it's almost impossible to avoid. So it's just a reload. It's like, oh, my party got shoved off this cliff, so I've just gotta reload. Don't like that. A lot of weapons have these other little, like, I don't know what to say about them. They've got like special attacks, but they're very weak. To kind of make up for the fact that you have them by virtue of having the weapon, whereas normally for the more powerful versions of those abilities, you would need to have a strong class feature, like the superiority dice for a fighter or something like that. I didn't tend to use them most of the time, and I didn't even really shove most of the time either, because I wanted to be able to loot the enemy. As far as one system I really like in Baldur's Gate 3 is I like the food system. It's very meaningful, in my opinion, especially when you're playing on Tactician. At least when I played on Tactician, I needed 80 food to rest. So you're looking for every scrap of food you can find, and it really eliminates how many full rests you can take. But like I say, the game kind of ran the gamut from being very easy to I have to cheese the AI to beat this encounter. Some encounters I had to play 5 or 6 times. Some I just smashed them the first time I saw them. Most of the end of the game was like that too, honestly. I think Act 3 is easily the weakest act. Last point, fucking just play a freaking paladin. So the reason why I like to play paladins in CRPGs, there's actually some very serious considerations for paladins. One, they're a tanking class. They're one of the toughest tanks in the game, especially if you go Oath of Ancients. Two, they've got all the charisma skills you can need. So what that means, and they can use pretty much every piece of gear. So what it means is the character that you have selected is your character, and that's the one leading the charge in the game, and it's also the one running into all the encounters that require, social roles and things like that. If you play a sorcerer, I could imagine it being very tedious to have to switch back and forth between like Lysel or Karlach and the sorcerer. Oh, we're running around the woods. I better have, a tanky character up front who sucks at social interaction. Oh shoot, I've run into a social encounter and now I've got this fucking shitty tank that's trying to do it with negative charisma. And then switch over to your sorcerer when you're going to be in town or something doing social stuff. It's a pain in the ass. So you can just keep yourself on your paladin, and you can handle combat encounters and social encounters without having to swap or accidentally get the wrong character. For this game, there are a crap ton of special options as paladin. And a note on the code. The code's actually kind of fake. So I was pretty concerned with keeping my paladin code, because normally if you break your code, you lose everything. You lose everything. You lose your spells, your auras, your pretty much all your class features, your channel divinity. In this game, you only lose channel divinity. And it's not that big a deal. The healing aura that ancients get is okay, but you can live without it. So I wouldn't sweat the code. And in fact, I think the code has some jacked up stuff in it. I'm going to talk about more in Act 3. So like I say, overall, it's a good interpretation of D&D. I'm really waiting for an editor to come out. I'm not certain, now that I know that Baldur's Gate 3 is level capped at 12, I'm not completely certain that they programmed the entire SRD into the game. It could all be there, but I'm not sure that it is. Um, I'm hoping they've got a DLC that's in the works that's going to come out soon, or, like I say, an editor or something, because this is what I wanted. The framework of 5th edition that works in a video game. Alright, so let's go on. So Act 1, virtually no negative feedback. They worked their asses off on Act 1 and the prologue. I think it was excellently done. I think the characters are good. I think the conflicts you have are interesting. For me, I have to kill all the goblins in the castle. That's just a shit encounter. It's not particularly hard. I mean, at the low level you're going to be at, it's hard. But it's mostly tedious. It's mostly waiting, 6 hours for 30 goblins to act. And then some of them are in really inaccessible spots, too. I thought it was a pain. I thought it was just ridiculously painful. It was like, that's when I would have preferred to have real time. I might have had some trouble, but the real time would have been fine. It would have made that less painful, and that's not something that's rare. That's something that's common, where they just do enemy spam. But for the goblins, that's when you're more vulnerable to enemy spam. That's when you can deal with it less well than later on in the game. Act 1's early D&D. It almost requires save scumming. The point I'm trying to make there is, okay, my paladin has a ridiculously high armor class of 21, 22. So I don't know all of the math going on, but, they should need something like a 15 or a 16 to hit me. Okay. So it also means almost anything that hits is going to be a crit, and at this lower level, just one crit could kill you. Or one hit could potentially kill you. So that's one of the things that's frustrating is, for example, my wife and I were doing the Paladins of Tyr encounter. Okay, we were playing on Tactician. And essentially, the first time we played it, the Paladin of Tyr hit me, downed my paladin, first hit, then ran over, hit our cleric, downed our cleric. So then that just leaves my wife's character. She's had the rogue and the sorcerer. So then she goes, they kill another paladin of Tyr, not the main guy, they're taking out the ads. He goes, kills us both, the cleric and the paladin. So now it's pretty much fixed, right, to the sorcerer and the rogue. And then it just came down to, I think we had to reload a couple of times, because what she ended up doing was just cheesing with the sorcerer. She just hit with the paladin with shocking grasp, so he didn't he didn't have a reaction. And then she was just jumping up on the roof, and the AI was not smart enough to jump after her the way that she was moving, so it would just dash after her. So essentially that was it, and it just came down to whether or not she missed a shocking grasp. She did at one point, and she got down to 1 HP, somehow survived. I think by that time the paladin was out of spells and lay on hands. But it's just crap like that, it's like, the chances for my character to have been hit are extremely low. If we reloaded, Well, not on Tactician, they get a hit bonus. But if we reloaded, there's a very good chance that both the Paladin's attacks would have missed, and we would have slain him right out of hand. So, like I say, it's so swingy. Early D&D, it always has been, always will be. But you got to make sure you save. The choices to me feel real in Act 1. The decisions you make seem to have real consequences. It's possible that I just never experienced some of the bullshit. Maybe that happens later. But it seems like the choices you make do matter in Act 1. Like, depending on who lives or who dies, it really does have an effect on the end of the game. Alright, Act 2. I mostly skipped Act 2. So, because what happened was I just killed the Drider for the lantern right at the start. And I spent most of the time on the left half of the map, kind of in the city. So I didn't even get to the inn or anything. I did all of that after I beat the boss, which means I have no idea who these Harpers are. And actually, the inn is completely empty when you get there. Just the corpse of the guy that you need to lift the Shadow Curse. I thought the Shadow Curse was a pain in the ass. It was just a pain to have to change my my light source and find somebody to carry this stupid thing. And then I don't know if I was having an error or what, but when I first started Act 2, somebody was able to carry the lantern in their shield arm. Later on, it could only be a weapon. I don't know, maybe I'd put it on a dual-wield character, but I remembered it being on my cleric. But that was painful. The area was very thematic. You know, the fights were interesting. So my next bullet point, most of the fucking encounters were crap. Absolutely. Like, if you decide to fight the demon in Shar's temple, who else was real shit? I didn't like the Toll Master. I mean, it's like once you figure out the mechanic, I got very lucky because those masks will try to run. But I think the time I finally downed her, I made sure to block off the stairs so they couldn't freaking run up to the roof. That's another thing I have a problem with this system. It is so hard to figure out when something's blocked. You know, I'll have enemies constantly just practically running through my party. They don't even get an attack of opportunity, and they didn't disengage or anything. Maybe they had ability to let them do it. And yet, I'll try to walk through a gap like a mile wide, and it's like, oh, sorry, it's blocked. You can't fucking walk through there. And that's another thing that I hate, is jumping is like a free action. It's just free movement. It's like you get the movement from your jump and your move as a bonus action. I think that's crap. When the enemy uses it against you, it sucks, but, I mean, you can kind of cheese a lot with it. It's wacky. Like I said, my wife was just jumping across a roof, and the opponent kept dashing to catch her. The fight with Balthazar. So I went into that without a wizard, and that was freaking terrible. So the way I ended up doing Balthazar was I just shot him when I was at like max range, hid some characters completely out of combat, and I just had Asterion just plinking off all the skeletons. And, 45 minutes later, when all the skeletons were freaking dead, I finally brought my guys in to kill Balthazar and finish everything else off. That just sucked. Like that Balthazar encounter is actually, I think it's pretty hard. It probably would have been easier with Gale, but still Balthazar, he starts out with haste and all of his wizard buffs, and he's blowing off like freaking 3 spells around. It's just crazy. On top of all of his skeletons and shit. Again, choices seem to matter. My understanding is if you lose characters or if you do, depending on what you do, it really changes things up. So, Act 2 for me was kind of so-so. I got stuck in the Temple of Shar for a long time just because I couldn't figure out where the last trials were. Eventually did, though. So Act 3, let me go back to Act 2. So it took me a while to beat the Act 2 boss for 2 reasons. One, I thought it was possible for me to leave the area and come back. So I did all the fights to get out, but they're not to get out. They're just to get to a special treasure room that I could not solve because of I was playing on Steam Deck and I just could not manipulate the puzzle with the Steam Deck controls. So that was a pain. And then the fight ended up being awful. I figured it out. And by the way, I was only, I think, I was level 7 when I did it. I've heard of people being level 10. I imagine it's a joke encounter if you can actually get to level 10 before you reach it, but I was level 7. But I just took it slow, did what I told you to do, kill all the ads, and then go after the boss. I figured out that the platform prevents healing, and he eventually knocks everybody off the platform so you can pick him up. So since I had to restart the encounter so many times and I learned the mechanics, I knew just to leave like some summons up there. I think I had a Cambion for Will, and then of course us. But once you figure that out, it's just a joke encounter. It's super easy. That kind of annoyed me. I was like, this should either be a hard and like knock off some of the gimmicks, right? Knock off some of this auto lose crap and just make the encounter harder, right? And I think it'd be less disappointing. It was actually fucking disappointing when I finally beat it. And I was just like, wow. You learn the trick and that's it. Okay, so even though I got to level 8 before actually reaching Act 3, because I cleaned up some of the things. Even though I was only level 8, it felt like I got to level 12 in a heartbeat. And I still had a lot to do. And it just made a lot of the dungeons like redundant and tedious. It's like, oh, why am I even fucking going through these 50-man encounters that take an hour for a piece of treasure I don't give a shit about? And that's my next point, was one of the first things I did was actually go through the House of Hope and kill Raphael. So I got that Hell Armor, Gauntlets of Giant Strength. I gave them to the Warlock and then I just bought them back from her. And the Amulet of Health. So now my, when I make a Paladin, I always focus on Charisma. And I do Constitution and Strength secondary. And that's normally enough to get me through, and I just kind of do a little less damage, and I have less health, but it doesn't matter. Well, that completely negated it. Now I've got max strength and max health and max charisma. So, like I say, my character is just fucking a piece of iron. Almost nothing could destroy him. And then you can buy the rest of what you need, so it's like a lot of the other stuff really feels like a waste of time, except for getting the story stuff. Here, Illusion of Choice. I betrayed the Emperor because I didn't trust him. I thought he was full of shit trying to turn me into an illithid. But mainly, I was like, what's going to happen if I side with the Emperor? The Gith are going to turn on me. I don't want to deal with their freaking monks, and I don't want to deal with a red dragon. Well, guess what? The final encounter, a dominated red dragon shows up. So it's like, fuck you guys, man. And that's just, kind of an example. There's so much crap like that where it's like you have a choice between A or B, but the solution always is C. I didn't like that. I didn't like a lot of that stuff story-wise. It was, it really irritated me. So it's like I say, Act 3, like a lot of it feels like a waste of time. And then, food access. Oh. I'll just have to re-record this later. I've got to go to an appointment to try and get some medicine. Alright. Alright. I'm pausing my presentation and not pausing the actual stream. Well, in case there's anybody that sees this before I remove it, I'll just go over this really quick. So there's a point where you need some meat to feed to a dinosaur, and there's no meat anywhere. I had to just scour the entire map, and eventually I found a sausage off some thief I killed or something stupid. I remember it was a pain. But food became a real problem, and it shouldn't have been. So I actually had to use Hero's Feast. I had to do a spell restoration amulet to get my level 6 spell back every time I wanted to rest. Cast Hero's Feast, get enough food to rest. And that strategy made the entire, second half of the game kind of lame. Because I could always rest whenever I wanted. Even if I was in a dungeon where you weren't supposed to be able to rest, you could just run out of it with no consequence because there's no respawns in the game. I think that was a missed opportunity, and I think it was a missed opportunity to let you rest without wandering monsters. But, so I think oh my goodness, I better get to this doctor. So I think that was a mess. And then there was many fucking bugs. I think some really hurt the game. It's impossible to save Karlach. I think that's stupid. There should be a lot of different ways to save her, but apparently she was really rushed, so of course that's how that turned out. One of the reasons that there's so many fucking minor bugs in Act 3, it's just ridiculous. It gets really, really tedious. And certain decisions, right? So, you used to be able to buy supply packs from Volo. After you rescue Volo, you cannot trade with him anymore. He just shouts at you and ends the dialogue. So that's a pain. That's one of the reasons I needed Hero's Feast. God, what else? I did something that would break an Oath of Vengeance Paladin's oath. I showed mercy to somebody that was guilty. That should not be a problem for Oath of Ancients. Broke my oath, and the Oathbreaker Paladin does not appear in Act 3. I don't know if that's intentional or not. But that was a pain in the ass. That actually really made me mad. Because I didn't feel like I deserved to have my oath broken. But at the same time, I didn't want to have to freaking do that fight all over again. And that's when I discovered, I just lost my channel divinity. Who gives a shit? It's such a weak ability, and I only get to use it once per long rest. Who gives a damn? I get all of my spells still, all of my auras, everything's intact. It would actually hurt me to become an Oathbreaker, because Oathbreaker is such a shitty subclass. So that made me mad. And there's other stuff pissed me off, you can free Orpheus. So the Orphic Hammer has a special move specifically to free people from restraints. It does not work to free Orpheus. You have to use a regular main hand attack on, like, after forcing you to learn that you need this special attack to free people from their bonds, they actually made it so that attack does not work to free the main guy from his bonds. You have to just attack it normally. It's like, shit pisses me off. But I did finish the game. I feel like I got the best ending you could get. I was absolutely fucking pissed off that actually you should have just trusted the Emperor from the beginning. Maybe not, alright? I don't know what happens with his end. I haven't done it. But as far as his turning you into an illithid, you need an illithid in the end. You have to be an illithid, so I just turned my paladin to an illithid, killed himself. Like I say, it was a decent game, but I got to get rocking and rolling. I'll probably try and do a higher effort slideshow and re-record this later.